walk away with a book that Ann's going to be more than happy to sign for you right out in the lot. We have books of Ann's for sale, and as well as David. So thank you.
Thank you. And this book is called Dissent, Voices of Conscience, and it's stories about men and women of our government who, during the Bush administration, were speaking out about what was going on and what happened to them. I myself, I resigned so I could leave the government and speak freely. But we had people inside the government that said, I don't want to resign. I think I want to stay in and try to make the system work, which I tried to do before I resigned, but it wasn't working. So I figured we needed to have a little bit more resignation part of it. But men and women in our military who said, this war in Iraq's wrong, I'm not going to it. Even though I volunteered for the military, I'm not going to do that. So they ended up going to prison. 35 of them so far have gone to prison. And the stories, their statements of conscience about why they chose to challenge the system, knowing full well that they would go to prison for it. Anywhere from 3 months to 15 months in jail. So those are some of the stories that we have in that book, Dissent, Voices of Conscience. And then just briefly, Afghanistan. I was there for 7 days. I hadn't been there in eight years. I was there in December of 2001 and helped reopen the U.S. Embassy there and stayed for about 5 months. 8 years that the United States has poured billions of dollars in there. 8 years that we've killed Afghans every single day. 8 years that we've had almost 1,000 of our own military killed there, and civilian contractors killed there too. You know, in the combined Iraq-Afghanistan wars, we've now had over 5,000 U.S. military killed. We've had 1/3 of that number have been civilian. Add to it 1/3 of that, again, 1,600 contractors have been killed during that period. And over, I think it's 35,000 of them have been injured. So the privatization of the U.S. military for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan is something that I think we need to be concerned about, and concerned in Afghanistan, where we see that 70% of the monies that we as taxpayers have pumped into that country for economic development have not gone to the Afghans. They've gone into the pockets of U.S. contractors. Only 30% of all of the billions that we put in for schools, for clinics, for roads, for whatever it is, has really gotten to Afghanistan. And that's what the Afghans mentioned to you when you're there. You know, we thought y'all were a little smarter than that. Biggest democracy in the world, biggest economy, biggest whatever. We thought you had a little better strategy on how to handle things, and indeed we haven't. And the diversion to the Iraq war is certainly part of it. But some of the things Afghan, just a second, let me just finish this and I'll be glad to. Some of the things the Afghans told me, you can't leave us now. We said, well, aren't you ready for us to go 8 years later? Well, you know, this whole thing of what are we going to do when you leave, the story that we got, and not that I believe it, I mean, not that, I shouldn't say believe it, but not that I say this is a reason why we have to stay, but consistently, we need more people in our national military trained to withstand what we know is going to happen, the Taliban coming back, or some of the warlords that are a part of the Karzai government, and warlords that we paid for in 2001 to fight against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. They're going to come back and they're going to start that civil war all over again. They also say it would be nice if you all could help provide some funding for a reintegration and reconciliation process with the Taliban, because not all of the members of the Taliban are ideologues. Most of them get hired on a weekly basis because that's the only job in town in the southern part of the country. And another part, why don't you try to get the border sealed? You guys are giving Pakistan $1.5 billion a year. Why don't you require? Why don't you make sure? Why don't you tell the Pakistanis that you're not going to get the money, you know, unless that border gets sealed off? Why is it that, or is it that our money that we give to the Pakistanis, part of it goes right back into the training and equipping of the Taliban that comes back over into Afghanistan? So there's a lot of things that the Afghans have to say to us. I am for an exit strategy, a timetable to get us out of there. I think supporting that reconciliation and reintegration process is really, really important. De-escalation, no, in my opinion. Removal of troops, yes, and not overnight, as we've never really called for. I mean, we say troops out now, it's a good slogan, but now doesn't mean tonight, and it's impossible, and it really would leave a vacuum. I mean, it's gotta be, but it doesn't have to be 10 years from now, it doesn't have to be 5 years from now. It certainly ought to be a much more expeditious thing than what we see coming out of the Obama administration, in my opinion, which is an increase in the military, in the militarization of our look toward Afghanistan.
Do you have any thoughts on